Welcome to our continuing coverage of Analytics, Big Data and the Cloud Conference taking place at Fantasyland Hotel in West Edmonton. Don't forget, you can catch us on the web at fuselogic.tv, abctech.ca, and bestofanalytics.com. Now, there are a lot of topics being discussed at this conference. One of them, today's theme is connecting communities. And we've got some people here from Calgary and Edmonton. We're going to talk about communities, cities, I guess the infrastructure with them and where we're going to go in the future. So perhaps I'll just get you to each introduce yourself and where you're from.
My name's Ron Murch. I'm with the Haskayne School of Business at the University of Calgary.
Okay.
My name is Beth Sanders. I'm president of the Alberta Professional Planners Institute and also a freelance planner here in Edmonton.
Okay.
I'm Jim Floyd. I'm from Calgary, and I have a company called On Ltd that does sustainable energy.
Okay. Well, Beth, we'll start with you since you're our mic stand.
Okay.
And, we'll start with you. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the origins. I mean, people get quite involved when it comes to their city and what's happening, especially in their neighborhoods. So tell us a little bit about the origins of cities.
Well, when we go right back, way back in time, and we imagine the beginnings of a city, usually it has something to do with the physical habitat. We need food, we need shelter, and we find a place where that works for us. So that's where a settlement actually starts. And then we start to build a community around that as a social sphere, if you will. And at the very heart of it all, though, is actually the economic stuff that we do, so the work that we do. So we take a resource and we develop it, and then it grows and it grows and it grows to the point where we're here in 2012 at the Fantasyland Hotel talking about data and analytics, like all the way from, you know, hewers of wood and water, all the way up to the technology that we have today. But our cities really have come about because of the work that we do and all of the different varieties of work that we do, and then we build on it and build on it, and we build an environment where we can exchange ideas and build on ideas, but all of that only happens and we only survive as cities, and this is proven out over the millennia as well on planet Earth, that those cities still only survive if we're sensitive to the physical context in which our cities are, so the environment, frankly.
Mm-hmm. So when you say they only survive if we're conscious of that, I mean, Edmonton has 1 million people in it. Do we have to be conscious of that for the city to survive? Is it not going to go anyway because of the number of people here, or in Calgary as well, the same sort of thing?
Well, I don't think Edmonton is going to disappear, but I think we do have to be sensitive. If we look at all of the 479 cities over 1 million people on planet Earth right now, when there was only one 212 years ago. So we've changed quite a bit as the Earth's population has increased, the vast majority of it, and now the majority of people on Earth living in cities. The collective impact of that is clearly having an impact on our environment as a planet, right? So there's different scales to look at. Is Edmonton going to survive? Someone like James Lovelock and his research on Gaia theory would tell us we're in a very good place because it might get warmer here and we will still be able to live. But there are other places on Earth, so we might be actually accommodating a lot more people coming to live where we are. So things may change just because of how the environment is going to change on our planet.
We also have a distinct impact on the environment in terms of the work that we do requires some infrastructure in order to undertake it, and that infrastructure allows us to create more economic value. The economic value then allows us to have a better lifestyle. It allows us to have happier families and to expand our influence, and the decisions that we make are predicated on the physical environment we start with, and then on top of that we initially overlay some infrastructure which, once we put it in place, becomes very, very difficult to change. And that's actually some of what Jim gets involved with, having to do with power distribution and so on. Once you make the decision of how are we going to generate and distribute electrical energy, then that becomes a restrictive parameter in terms of how you can then go about it, further building both the physical aspects and the community aspects, what you can do within there to work and thrive and live healthy lives and lifestyles and so on.
Well, Jim, let me ask you, have we got the infrastructure in place? Have we planned well in the past to take us into the future?
We've done a really good job in the past to get us where we are. We are a very mechanized society. We've got great systems. But we can't keep building the way we built in the 60s and hope that it's going to work for us forever in the future. And so we have to adapt and develop new technologies and really implement these new technologies as they become available into the systems as we're going. We have to integrate all that new stuff in. And we've been slow at doing that.
Why?
I think fear on cost. fear on failure, fear that we maybe it wasn't going to work or last as long as it could, or that something better might come out. And I think a lot of it is very short-term cycle on business and political thinking. And
Well, who has the fear? Is it the public or is it the political administration?
I think it's at all levels. I think everybody has that. And financially, you have to, a lot of times people look at only the capital cost. What's the cheapest to build and not what is the cheapest to own over a long period of time. And so we make decisions based on how much we're putting out just today and not sort of thinking it out over the whole term. And I think that's where we're losing some opportunities.
And with the political cycle as well, being every 3, and I think they're talking about making it 4 years now. But it seems as though they get in, they're sort of tentative at first, and then they've got a couple of years where they work, and then they start focusing on getting reelected. And I've been told in interviews with city council here in Edmonton that decisions have been put off because an election is coming up. And so they put off a major decision, which of course ends up costing the taxpayers, but they put it off because nobody wants to be seen on the wrong side of the issue.
And I think if you're not, some of the new technology, it's not well understood, so people are a little more reluctant to make a bad decision because they just maybe don't understand it or they haven't seen it. So it's always tough to introduce new ideas and get them to be accepted. But I think as they become more commonplace, we'll just accept them as they are. I mean, if you went back 30 years ago and said, listen, let's try to build something that'll provide internet, there'd be a lot of towns that would be, oh, really? Is that what we got to do? And they may not have wanted the infrastructure. Nowadays, you wouldn't imagine building stuff without having that kind of telecommunications capacity. So,
and you talk about being stuck in the past. Beth, you're from Edmonton. Mayor Stephen Mandel, when he was elected or shortly thereafter, he came out and said, no more, and I may not have, you know where I'm going here, no more crappy buildings in this city. And that's what he talked about, because he would have argued, I guess, that everything looks the same, there's nothing that really stands out, and so that was one of the things he said. Is that part of being stuck in the past? Is it this is the way we keep doing things, and he had a vision, but maybe he ran into other people along the way who didn't share that?
Well, I think for any city or any community or any family, any social unit, you think about someone somewhere sticks their neck out and says, I think it could be different, I think it could be better. Even with the election yesterday in the province of Alberta, somebody sticks their neck out, so does somebody else. We have several party leaders, and then we vote and choose, which limb we want to go out with, right? I mean, it's part of the democratic process, but it's really important for someone to put their neck out there so then we can organize ourselves and follow along with that idea. But really organizing a city, making a city, it's not just the engineers and the planners or the academics, it's all of us are in it together, because we're actually building our habitat that we live in, and we have a choice, just like we do in our homes, to choose, do we want to spend a lot of money and have nice furniture, or spend not so much money and have really nice furniture, or not pay any attention to it. And that's kind of what Mayor Mandel speaks about when he's talking about the quality of our buildings or our urban form, is what do we want it to look like while we're living in it? It's got to work well, but is it going to look and make us feel good about where we live at the same time, which is not a bad message. Doesn't necessarily become a compelling message for every citizen, but he's out there, and quite a few people are following along with that.
Absolutely.
now I don't get a vote in Edmonton.
We've kept it that way so Calgarians can't decide for us.
Too bad.
Okay. Yeah.
But if I had a vote, I would want a mayor that had some vision and wanted to build a better product. I mean, long term, what are you going to leave behind for your kids and the rest of everybody else?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting dynamic, particularly from if you take a kind of a business point of view. Most organizations understand or think that they need to make a profit, and it's relatively short term. When we talk about building cities or creating communities, it's not about profit and it's not about a short term. But the difficulty is that most of the people that are suggesting the regulatory environment and the electoral environment and so on and so forth have a much shorter time horizon than we actually need. And there isn't a lot of conversation going on about the underpinning or the underlying values. What do we want that city to feel like? How do we want people to behave in the city? What kind of people generally do we want to come together to help us build this community and to create and sustain the community over a long time? What legacy do we want to leave for our kids? Jim and I are involved on a periphery in an advisory way with an initiative that's going on in Calgary that's actually has begun as a values-driven initiative, but is running up against the difficulties of the regulatory environment. And it's precisely the same kind of situation that Jim was talking about. And that's a difficult bridge to put in place, actually, to get through that. There are some key or core values that need to inform the design process before you get to figure out what electrical standards do we use, what transportation standards do we use, and so on. Now, I don't know from a planner's perspective how that fits.
Well, just as I look at how cities are built, I mean, people are messy, right? Like we have conflict. The whole process of making decisions together, I think, is actually necessarily messy. So that's something we have to come to get used to as citizens, right? Like, forget what professional hat we have. That's the way it is, and we need to learn to be more comfortable with that. There's something about the quality of our civic practice that needs to shift and adjust. As a planner, I have to look at how I interact with my client, because I don't work for local government anymore, and I have to look at how I interact with the public. But when it comes back down to these rules, I think what's starting to happen, and Ron articulated it really well this morning, is getting a real sense of why we have a city and what its purpose is and what values are embedded in that purpose. And as soon as you know what those values are, then you take another look at the rules, and they have to recalibrate. They have to adjust from the 1960s, as Jim put it, to what do those rules need to be that will help us get at the city we're looking for today and looking ahead. So there's a recalibration that's underway. The trouble is, change happened really slow in the 1960s. I wasn't there, but I know this for a fact, because in my life, I'm 42, I'll reveal my age, but things in my career, when I started working as a professional planner in 1995, it was still pretty kind of slow. Like, things weren't changing a lot, but things are changing quite a bit in our world right now. And the rules also need to change with them. But our processes, even for changing rules, necessarily take a long time. So there is this sticky patch. We're in a sticky patch because things are changing. The rules that we need to have, because you need those rules to get to your purpose, they need to recalibrate. They kind of need to recalibrate quickly, but we're not able to recalibrate quickly because we're human. Yeah. So it's a kind of an existential sticky bit that we're in.
You know what? We're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
We're going to take a 1-minute break, and we'll be back and discuss this a little bit more. Okay? We'll be right back. Don't go.
Business happens fast. Clients expect immediate responses. A great way to build rapport? A custom rapid video response using Skype. The Fuse Logic Rapid Video Response program will immediately separate your business from your competition. Here's how it works. Step 1. Identify a marketing message you want to share. Step 2. Contact Fuse Logic. We will help you pull together your rapid video response script with key messaging. Next, our Fuse Logic TV team will do a test call with you to check your Skype account, sound, and lighting in your office. We schedule a recording date and time and produce your rapid video response video show. Here's an example.
Hi, this is Rob Pendy of June Warren Nichols Energy Group. I'm here to announce a new partner.
Don't wait. Call Fuse Logic TV today and create your cost-effective rapid video response.
Welcome back. We're talking about cities, how they grow, how they can prosper as well in the future. You're talking about governments have to change. That's one of the prevailing themes here, is that when it comes to big data and analytics, not only is the industry relatively new, but government struggles to keep up with it as well. How do we improve that?
Well, that's actually a very interesting sort of transition into the topic of analytics and big data. The cloud computing is actually a means to an end. If you have a lot of data and you don't know exactly what it's telling you, then it's unstructured data, and you need some kind of analytic and data mining and visualization approaches to tease meaning from that. And that's the process that Beth was talking about, where we've got this messy process to work with, and we need to be able to tease some meaning from it. So somehow we have to capture all that unstructured data, and we're now beginning to see technologies emerge that allow us to capture that and save it. And then we need to be able to go in and look at it and tease out the meaning in it. not necessarily just the metrics, but the what does this mean, and use that meaning to inform the planning and design processes. So in some ways, you would say that the analytics in the big data context is advisory to these other public processes, as opposed to the more structured approach where I have this question, let's go out and see what the people think. Oh, here's what the people think to that question. Well, if you didn't ask the right question, you're
not going to get the right answer.
Well, you'll get an answer,
Yeah.
but it may not, in fact, help you or help inform the action that you would take to be sufficiently sustainable or a sufficiently long horizon or something like that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and so the context of advisory is now becoming much more exploratory, and the analytics tools that are evolving now, particularly with text mining and with sentiment analysis and that sort of thing, those kinds of things now tend to inform these messy processes better.
Well, Jim, I mean, here in our city, you may not be aware of it, but one of the things that you can almost count on with our council is that they will always put it off. They will always put the decision off for more study. It happens over and over and over again. Every time you expect something to be decided upon, it gets delayed. Do you see where analytics can help speed up that process?
It's got to. I mean, we've got to get that pace of this development faster. We've got to be able to adopt new technology faster. The people that are involved in making those decisions have to be able to understand it faster. We can't, if we're going to compete globally and compete with other cities in the area and other locations and facilities, you're just going to have to do it or you're going to fail.
So how do you convince the powers that be that this is what they've got to do?
I think we have to make it easier for them. This is about having the right information and enough information in a timely basis so they can make better decisions.
It isn't just easier. It also has to be informative and relevant. So it does have to be relatively easy, but it has to have meaning, and that meaning is anchored in the why, which we came back to before. So having that explicit connection back to this will make a better city, this will be better economically, and then the opportunity to use various what I would call constrained processes. And Beth, you may have a perception on this, but the idea of something like a pilot project or a pilot community that allows us to test and learn, and then take that learning and feed it back into in a fairly quick cycle and a fairly meaningful way, feed that learning back into now what are we going to do with a bigger picture.
Well, they did sort of try that in Edmonton with a slower speed limit. If you remember in some of the neighborhoods where they dropped it to 40 because there was a public outcry that motorists were driving too fast. So they tried that for a short period of time, and now they've implemented it.
Well, and some communities liked it, and
some
some
did not,
didn't.
yeah.
So there's something to that notion of prototype, and then also flexibility. And even though we don't necessarily feel like we have the time, we must take the time to learn, which means taking in some data and getting some feedback and stopping to notice what that feedback is saying. This is required of our elected officials, our administrative officials that work for them, but also the public at large. I was struck not too long ago watching a politician, a local councillor, make a presentation, and then the crowd asking questions. And it struck me that every single person that stood up was asking that councillor or telling them what they were doing was wrong. And it struck me that if we want our local elected officials, or any elected official for that matter, to do what we want them to do, we need to tell them more about what they're doing right. And that's not something as citizens we typically do. We tell them what we don't want, what we don't want, what we don't want. Well, anybody you tell constantly, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, they don't have a fighting chance of doing what we want. So I envision the whole analytics industry, particularly if it's attached to our values, then we have a way of seeing what people are wanting more of. And then our elected officials are going to at least be remotely equipped to say, okay, I finally get it. They want more of this. Or this demographic wants more of this. This demographic might want more of this. And have a way of saying, okay, so how do we get through all of this and get it all? How can we have it all? And I believe we can.
I think if a little experimentation would go a long way. I love these pilot programs. You try it someplace, you try it in a small area, you don't put out a lot of cost on it. You try it out. People have a chance to look at it. They decide whether they like it or not, and if they like it, you adopt it. And we got to have that sort of infrastructure, that political and the service, be able to do that. They've got to be a little bit less constrained to take on a little bit of experimentation.
So I find sometimes, because we're talking about LRT lines here in Edmonton now and where they should go, and some people think it's great that it comes down their street, and other people think that it's not good. But you're talking about building sustainable cities. We have to assume that the elected officials have the information necessary, and if they were to go through analytics, then they'd have more information. You want to get feedback from the citizen, but does there not come a time when the people in charge just have to say, this is best for our city? Talking about it is nice, but this is what we have to do.
Absolutely. I mean, my personal opinion would be that's what we elect them to do. There is a natural hierarchy in our world. So the analytics can flatten everything out so we can get a sense of what everyone is thinking, say, if you follow the Twitter feed or whatever, but it's still only the people that are on Twitter, right? Or the whole discussion in the news today about the pollsters, and are they only talking to people on landlines, and does that skew the results? So the key thing here is sources of information or data sets from a variety of different places. But we have asked those people to make decisions. If they don't make decisions, then we don't really get anywhere. So necessarily they are elected to do that on our behalf. Do they need to be in touch with their constituents? Absolutely. Does the whole notion of analytics and big data and the cloud help them or maybe obscure? I don't know. Maybe the jury's out on that yet, and we'll have to develop a whole new skill set as our city of Edmonton or Calgary or the province of Alberta to figure out how to use this stuff for forces of good,
Mm-hmm. Great, excellent. Well,
May the force be with you.
With all of us.
And with you.
With all of us, yes. Thank you very much for your time today.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
certainly appreciate it. And, thank you. And my mic stand, wonderful job, Beth. Thank you very much. And